Hi, I'm Sarah.
And I'm Helen.
And this is the Squiggly Careers podcast. Every week we take a different topic to do with work and we share some ideas and some actions that we just hope are going to help all of us navigate our squiggly careers with that bit more confidence and control.
And if you haven't already, make sure that you sign up for our Squiggly Careers in Action weekly newsletter. You'll be able to download the pod sheet that comes with this episode, and you'll also get lots of other links to learn from too. So today we are going to be talking about energy at work and why managing your energy is more important than just managing your time. And it's a bit of I think it's a slightly different episode to normal because we are answering a question that has come from our audience, which we get asked a lot from people we know, people we don't know, like, how do you find energy for everything that you do? And I think we need to caveat that maybe a lot of people, they see what we do on social media, maybe. And so there's maybe a bit of that. Maybe not me. Okay, see what I do on social media. It's like, how is there so much content going out? So kind of caveat that social media isn't always reflective of reality. And then also, I think, would also like to caveat this episode before we even start with, we are not productivity gurus, and neither of us, I think the point is
neither do I want to be.
We don't want to be. We don't want to be. I think that's the point. What we're trying to get across in today's episode are, do we do quite a lot of things, a diverse range of things? Yes, between writing books and running a business and recording a podcast and other stuff, I think we do quite a wide variety of things. So we'll talk about how we find the energy to do those things, but we are not trying to portray ourselves as some productivity superhuman workers. We're just two hopefully relatively normal people who have found a way of working that gives us energy. And I think what we want to do is share what we've learned in case that helps you think about how you create energy for the work that you do too.
Yeah, I think what is true is that we've both realised that it's really important to take our energy seriously. I think we really care about it. We talk about it a lot. We talk about our energy much more than we do our time or being busy, like the busyness trap. And actually, it's a good reflection of, if you think for yourself in your week, how often does the word energy even show up? So for example, for us in Amazing If, every Monday morning we have our team meeting, and part of that team meeting is everybody shares a high energy moment they're looking forward to for that week. So we start our week by asking people, what's your high energy moment going to be? Now that might be something they're doing outside of work, it might be something they're doing in work, but we're already kind of framing our working week with energy. And then you and I think, are both very aware of our energy levels and then what they look like and then the impact it has if they're not where we would like them to be. So I think it's just been something that over time we talked about a lot more. And we're also very aware, I think, of how much energy we end our days with. So I think we talk a lot about energy in work and during work, but I think it's as important to think about when you get to the end of a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, what does that energy level look like for you? Because if every day your battery is completely drained when you finished the work part of your day, you don't have energy for anything else, all the other things that matter to you. And you and I both have had those conversations where we say, well, it's important to us that we've got the energy to exercise, to spend time with friends, for hobbies, for our kids, for the other things that we want to do. And if you're just completely drained at the end of a day or at the end of a week, then all of your sort of non-work time comes about recovery and replenishment, but you're not then giving energy to the kind of other things that are important to you.
I was trying to think as well about what's maybe changed that's meant that we've got better at this. Because if I go back sort of 5 years or so in corporate life, so I would have been in Microsoft, I think I probably thought more about my time in sort of meetings and minutes. So that was sort of the currency of my work, was how many meetings am I in and how many hours and minutes am I working a week, and how can I make sure that is optimal for my impact and all. I think
really efficient.
I think I thought about it in that way. Whereas since we have done this, I've become much more aware of actually the energy that we have is so important for our impact. It's nothing to do with minutes or meetings. I don't think like that at all. I think about our work depends on us giving energy to other people. So we might be in front of a big audience and we need to create energy. So I can't create energy if I've not got any to start with. Yes. So I'm much more aware of the exchange of energy that is going on in my week with the people that might be in our company or the people that we might be working with. And I think actually I could have thought about it like that in Microsoft. I just didn't. I think I got into a sort of a minutes and meetings trap in terms of how I thought about my impact. Whereas if I was going to go back to Microsoft now, I would still now think about the energy exchange in my week, and who I was exchanging energy with, and how I meant that each day I was kind of starting with as much energy as possible. It just wasn't my frame 5 years ago.
I think it was more for me.
Okay.
Actually, for quite a long time, but I think I always felt like a bit of an oddball as a result.
You?
Yes, surely not. But I think some of the things that I did and some of the choices that I made, actually going back as far as like when I worked in Barclays, I could feel the difference in my energy. And then I think I could see the difference in my work, in like, finding flow, but also like the quality of the work that I was doing and how proud I felt of that work. When I started to get into more like, well, what gives me energy? And then means I can kind of, like you say, give energy to the work that I'm doing to other people. I think I could really feel the difference. And also I didn't like the opposite. So I wasn't as good at coping at like back-to-back meetings and, things that just felt like you were draining and getting depleted. I think I kind of almost like railed and riled against that quite early on, but then it felt very hard to do in those big environments. So I think I did it in smaller pockets. Some of the things that we're going to talk about, I think have been present in my work actually for quite a long time, but now I have more freedom and flexibility to make it kind of more core to how I work.
I also think I feel like there is more opportunity for you to influence the work that gives you energy than sometimes it is in terms of the minutes and meetings.
Yes.
Like my reflections on Microsoft, I might have thought, I'm in too many meetings, I'm spending too many minutes doing this, but good luck trying to get yourself out of some of those things. Whereas when I think about some of the things we're going to talk about today in terms of energy, I feel like I have much more autonomy over those things. So working with your energy, I think, is more in your control than perhaps the whole minutes and meetings type approach.
So both of us said we find it helpful to think visually about energy. I just think it is quite a visual concept. And we sort of imagine our energy going up, down, and kind of neutral during a week. And it's important to say, I think, that neutral matters. So it's not just all about like high energy, kind of low energy. It is also about having those kind of moments of just like neutral. It's like you're not giving a lot of energy, but it's not draining either. And then you're sort of fine. And that's important. So I think the mix of energy across your week matters. So it might even be worth you kind of tracking that for a week or so. Quite an easy thing to track. Like when do I feel like I'm really receiving energy maybe from other people? You could do it as like an exchange. When do I feel like I'm receiving it? When do I feel like I'm giving it? Does it feel like that is two-way, or does it feel like it's one way? If I think about some things that we do, when you get a brilliant audience and you're on a stage, I think the energy exchange can actually be really high. And so actually I've taken loads of energy from that audience, and hopefully I've given some too. But also you can sometimes be in some rooms where you're like, wow.
Giving a lot.
I feel like I'm giving a lot. I'm maybe not getting loads in return. Maybe they're just not connecting, or our approach is very different to things they've seen before. And so you feel like you're giving loads and loads and loads. And it doesn't mean that it's not valuable for those people. It just means that the exchange is not there. So I think energy exchange is also a kind of interesting one. And we've reflected on 3 areas and how we approach energy differently, because we actually think energy is so personal for everybody. Our differences are probably more interesting than our similarities. So people say to both of us, how do you have the energy? And actually the answer to that is quite different. So we've reflected on perspective, relationships and environment, and the impact that has on our energy. And we're going to talk about each of those and kind of what contributes to either giving energy or draining it, in case there are some useful things here that you can kind of borrow or try out for yourself.
Maybe just one more thing before we go into those. Understanding this about each other is really helpful. So it's totally okay for you to have your own way, and hopefully you'll pick up some ideas from what we share. But in a team, understanding
Yeah.
these different areas in terms of, well, how do you get energy in these different areas, it's so useful because it helps you to design your day or the meetings that you have or the time that you spend with that person with that in mind. So I'll often be thinking about, when I'm spending time with Sarah, how do I make sure that the days that we spend together have some of the things that I know are important to Sarah's energy in. Otherwise, if I just do it the way I want it, I basically get a slightly disengaged Sarah by the end of the day. Because it's got to work for both of you, but it is very helpful to know what good looks like for the other person.
And so I think this first one, we are pretty dramatically different in how we manage our energy. So talk about perspective, like what gives you energy in an average working week.
Yeah.
You're like, right, I want energy. What perspective do you take that kind of helps to keep that kind of graph on the high?
So the simplest way of thinking about perspective, I think, is sort of past, present, future.
Yeah.
And so for me, the perspective that is useful for my energy is present. I am very, very present focused. So that means that I don't get distracted by what happened yesterday or what happened last week, or it just doesn't enter my mind. I'm not
You're so in the moment.
I'm so in the moment. And I'm also not worrying, or no, it's not even worrying. I don't need to go to the future to be like, oh, well, the reason I don't need to get energy by attaching myself to a future outcome. So the reason that we're recording this podcast today is so that we can help, thousands of people with their energy. I don't need that. I just get energy from this moment, right now, this conversation. I'm in it as much as possible. And the reason it works for me is I don't have the other noise. I don't have the other noise. And every moment that I'm in is the moment in my mind, if that makes sense. And that means that I can just give all my energy to it, and then I'll move from this to the next moment, and that's where I am. So for me, being very present and parking all the stuff around a moment helps me to give as much energy as I can in that moment. And that's really different to you.
So just for people listening though who might be thinking, wow, how that sounds hard to do, like finding the signal in amongst the noise, like letting go of all of the things that are happening, it's quite a hard thing to do. What, almost like if you were giving people advice on like how to do that, like where would you start if you are somebody who does get distracted by all of the noise?
So I mean, the past thing is, I think that's a very personal. I'm just not anchored to the past at all. That is just a very, very personal thing. It's gone, it's done. So I don't think I have any advice for that. And that's just a behavioural thing. I do think it's important to think about the future. Like I do think that's an important thing to do. But there are moments that I almost diarise it because my head doesn't go naturally there. I know that I have moments in my diary, like with Sarah, for example, who's probably the person I would most think about the future with. And as long that has to be scheduled, otherwise I just won't do it. I'm so in the moment with my energy that it almost might be bad actually for us being able to like think ahead. So as long as I've got those moments diarised, that means that those things will get done. And I also kind of, I guess I have little moments where I let the world in, like between, so I'll be high energy here right now. And then I'll have a little moment where I'll kind of check in on the world around me.
Yeah, you do that. That is quite interesting.
I have a little check-in moment between, let's say we're doing this podcast and then Sarah and I are going to go do something else this afternoon. I'll have a little bit of check-in where I sort of let the world in and then I'm done, 10 minutes, done, away, back to being present in the moment. So I don't really know how helpful that is in terms of how practical, but that does, not letting the noise of past, future go on around, just being as present as I can in the moment is very, very effective for my energy.
Yeah, and I think I'm quite different in terms of what gives me energy. So I often find, because of all of the noise and the different things that we could do and that we want to do, I actually find I operate almost simultaneously across different time horizons.
Yeah, you do.
And I find that motivating. I find that gives me energy. So I'm not super past orientated, but I do want to know things like the data. So I wouldn't want to make a decision without data, especially when I know we now have some data that perhaps we didn't have before. So if we were like talking about the podcast, I would always be like, but let's remind ourselves, like, what does the data tell us? Like, what have we learned so far? So I kind of like that, making sure that we're learning as we go. Then I'm like, what's the decision that we need to make now? So I don't mind being present focused at all. But then I've also always got one eye on And then in 6 months' time, what might this mean? In a year's time, what might this mean? In 5 years' time, what could this mean? So I think I get energy from actually almost like jumping across different time horizons, which I can imagine, we talked about working together. For some people, and I can see that sometimes, because my brain naturally goes to, I'm really happy to be present, and then ask a question about 2 to 3 years' time.
Yeah.
And for some people, you're like, that's too far. You're like, but I can't be present and do that at the same time.
But it keeps you engaged in your work, doesn't it? Like joining the dots for you.
I think the agility of the different time horizons, I think it gives me confidence, which gives me energy. I'm like, confidence that we're not forgetting what's gone before, confidence in where we're going in the future, and therefore we're doing the right thing for now. So I, like to your point, I connect the dots. That gives me energy. And I think what drains my energy is if, particularly probably if I'm in present and we are ignoring the other two. That, like it's important to know kind of what works for you and what works against your energy. I think if we were thinking about something and we were sort of completely ignoring what's gone before and completely ignoring where we might go, I think I would find that draining, because I would find that too tactical, too in the moment. Sometimes you actually do need to do that though. But like it is, if you've got like a really like specific agenda where you just need to like work through a list of stuff, like I don't ever want to be in that meeting.
Yeah.
You just like, I guess that's what a lot of meetings are. But I was just trying to imagine like what I wouldn't, if you're just like, okay, we just need to do that, tick that, tick that off the list, cross that off. I'm like, oh,
it's
okay.
funny. It's good because obviously we have a bit of an energy clash with this kind of thing, and we're aware of it, which is why it's okay. But some of those meetings, I just don't invite you to them.
Yeah, I know.
Because I find them quite energizing, because I'm like, oh wow, well, like we got it done, amazing, half an hour well spent, and you'd be like, this is the worst half an hour of my week. And so some of them I will do them with the team, for example, and I just think, well, Sarah's not going to come out energized by that meeting, so I can update her afterwards, but she doesn't need to be in it. And so again, it's just the point of sharing this. We're not trying to be the same. I do notice for you though that your approach for your energy is particularly helpful, like in a hard moment where I would just go, well, let's just be present, let's just keep going.
Yeah.
And you will only stay engaged and energized if you've done like the reason we're doing this is, and I'm trying this today and I'm doing it because of this data. I know that helps you stay engaged and energized by your work when you're sort of rationalizing it with your perspectives.
So that's the first one that we do differently.
That's the first one, yeah.
The next one we thought was interesting is energy around relationships.
Yeah.
Because I do think energy often does feel like an exchange. Other people matter to, I think, everybody's energy, whether you're more extroverted like Helen or more introverted like me. And I think the thing that I noticed about my energy is having kind of deep connections and one-to-one conversations always makes a difference to my energy in a week. And often those conversations, thinking back to perspectives, are more about the future. So I'm having a conversation with somebody and we're just exploring. We're talking about what might be, what could be, where things might go. Maybe I'm just learning from that other person. But these are those curious career conversations. And they're thoughtful and they're intentional. I do them a lot more in person again now, actually, because people are around a bit more, not always though. And I find with those, if they disappear from my weeks completely, or I start to deprioritize them, which is really tempting to do, my energy goes down. And what's interesting is that often it's after the conversation that I feel really energized. It's like the hour afterwards, if I can then be by myself, that conversation will have often sparked 5 or 6 different thoughts for me. I sort of need some time alone then to like process and almost use that energy usefully to then be like, it's giving me an idea about this, I've got an idea about that now, I'm going to write some things down, and I'm really sort of sparky, and I can sort of almost like feel the energy. But it's quite hard to do, I would say. Like I see that because those things can be hard to make time for, and they're often quite time consuming in that I don't have quick conversations. It's just, I find it really hard to have like a half an hour conversation. I'm an hour, a 90-minute type conversation person. So you're not doing that frequently. So one of my reflections actually thinking about this was, that doesn't happen. That's not a weekly thing. I don't have one of those conversations every week. I probably do have one every month, but I might just want to think about, are there other ways that I could more frequently get energy from some of those relationships that don't always have to look like,
Deep.
like a 90-minute deep conversation. Yeah.
Do you have a list of people that I'm just trying to work out, if you're like, you're organising your diary around, like, that gives you energy, that you don't want to deprioritize it. So do you have a list of like people you would like to have those conversations with?
So I don't have a list written down. I think I do have a default of 4 or 5 people who I know really well, who I would always enjoy having a conversation with. And I do make an effort to stay connected to those people, to try and spend time with them. I also then try and blend that probably 50-50 with newness, because otherwise I am definitely someone who would be at risk of, I'm still having the same conversations with the same people, and they definitely give me energy, but then I'm not getting the, sort of, you do need to meet new people who've got different experiences and different things to offer you. And so I think I am quite thoughtful about like who those 4 or 5 people are. And I think there are a couple who like maintain their place because they are people that, I really appreciate their perspective and I love spending time with them. And then there are like new people who kind of make it into that list. Yeah. And almost like if I've not seen them for a while, I just think something goes off in my head where I'm like, oh, I've not seen that person for a month or a couple of months. I'll reconnect. I'll see if they want a coffee. I'll see if they want to grab something to eat at some point, and we kind of get it sorted.
I can always tell when you have had those conversations because your voice notes to me are extra,
oh God, I can
extra
imagine,
special.
Are they extreme?
Extra special
voice notes.
It's like a list of enthusiasm, which is not the go-to. I wouldn't say it's the go-to.
What my go-to?
It's not your
default.
It's not your go-to. It's very enthusiastic, and there's about 6 ideas, or it's like a jumble because you're generally quite coherent.
Apart from in those voice notes.
Yeah, and I can actually like hear the energy. The most recent one that you did like that was after your conversation with Dr. Sunita Saar, who was
she was really good. That
was definitely one where it was just like the energy. It was just, I could really hear how sparky that was for you in terms of like the energy and ideas. So this is another one where we're very different.
Yes.
I mean, I hope this is helpful for people to listen because it's mainly just our differences.
Whatever, it will prove that there's not just one way.
Yes, yeah. So my energy is definitely like when you talk about 90-minute deep, thoughtful conversations, I'm like, I mean, it's not that I wouldn't enjoy them, but it wouldn't be, I would be like, oh, it's interesting, but that would not give me energy. I am much more like one-to-many, put me in a room with lots of people. I think like almost like a human ping pong ball. I know that sounds awful.
Like a pinball machine. Like,
yeah. Oh, that. And be like, oh my gosh. And like, oh, that's so interesting that you're doing that. And then sort of bringing someone into a conversation, I'd like grab someone and I'd be like, let's ping pong over here. Like
it is almost surprising that you've stuck with me. When I listen to these things, I'm like, what is interesting though is like, I'm like, oh, we've sort of stuck. It's not surprising that I've stuck with you, but it's more surprising you've stuck with me.
Yeah, but there are just some things we don't do together.
That is true. That's also true.
We just worked out that they'd just be like bad things to do together. Because in those moments, it would just be like a bad energy cocktail, I think.
I don't want to be part of your pinball machine.
No, yeah. You have like a ping pong pinball machine. I'm sort of mixing 2 ideas, but I think it's the same. Yeah, it's a pinball machine where I'm like, but there's that. Is it actually what's interesting is I've got that quote on my phone this year about, meeting people being like a pinball and you never know where it's going to take you. But it actually does sit really well with me. And so I think what gives me energy is making sure in my week that I have like maybe like pinball moments.
Yeah.
Like when am I in a meeting or an environment where I'm going to be, look, there's lots of newness, they're relatively quick conversations. So, I had one last week when I was in Lisbon until I got poorly, where there was lots of people to sort of pinball with in there and lots of new people. I've got one this week where I'll be sort of reconnecting with a few people, but they're quite short conversations. I don't have an agenda. Maybe because maybe yours are more thoughtful. There are some topics you're talking about. Mine are very agendaless. And even if, I don't know, I don't really, sometimes I just come away and I'm like, oh, it's just nice to spend some time with those people. And I think maybe I steal their energy.
Right.
Maybe I'm like, bouncing around and I'm just sort of moments of conversations and I come away and I'm like, oh, Like
You've sort of topped up that
yeah,
battery.
it's like a top up. It's like a
from
top up.
all the different. I've just got images now of you like plugging into people and being like, I'll take a bit of your energy, or I'll take a bit of your energy.
Oh my gosh, I was watching a Black Mirror episode.
Oh, I've not watched them
night.
yet. I've not watched them. So
Okay,
don't tell me too much.
okay, but there's an episode where someone plugs into the
Ooh.
throng. I'm going to
Ooh.
leave it. I'm going to
Okay.
leave it. Anybody who's watched them, I think maybe I might be plugging into the throng.
Honestly, I have to be careful Black Mirror because they do give me genuine nightmares
Yeah,
sometimes.
it doesn't end well.
Okay,
It's probably a bad
I think you have to be in the right mood for Black Mirror.
Yeah, I agree. One episode at a time.
Yes.
Too many.
Yeah. Otherwise, you're like, no.
Well, think of me nicely when you watch that episode.
One reflection I think on relationships is I do wonder whether it's a useful thing for people listening to think about is there are the relationships that you have in your day job, and then there are relationships that kind of go beyond your day job. And what we have both defaulted to actually is relationships beyond our day job that give us both energy and like what that looks like. So those pinball conversations you're having, maybe something to do with your day job, but mainly not. Same with me. I might be running an idea about Amazing If past somebody, but they're not the sort of the real core day to day. And so I think that takes a bit of effort. So actually, you know, when people say, well, how do you do it? I'm like, well, actually, we both put effort into that.
Yeah.
Those things from both of us take effort and they're real choice to go kind of beyond the day. And then I think in the kind of the day job, thinking also about like the energy that you bring to kind of the core of what you do. And I think we both also put a lot of effort into that. Like I will really think about if I'm doing a workshop, and I know you would be the same for 500 people or 1,000 people, we're doing a big learning program. Both of us are very conscious and going, our job, our accountability is to turn it with energy. So what does that mean? Does that mean a break beforehand? Does that mean thinking about, you know, what your morning looked like before that moment? And so I think we do think about it across both of those, but it just shows that sometimes beyond the day job matters.
Yeah, and again, I will look at my week. So, for example, I'm going out tonight, but I've got some things tomorrow, and I'll just be thinking about what will my energy look like in the flow of my week, and what do I need to do differently so that I show up how I want to. Yeah, it's just a very different way of looking at a week, I think.
Which perhaps takes us on to the final one. So, environment. So, how does your environment affect your energy?
So for me, I like to, I think maybe it's like the present thing. I find sometimes mixing things up too much a bit hard. Like it's almost like I have to reset every time, and that's not always really productive. So and this again is often sometimes why we have a clash. I'm better at being like, today I am here.
Yes.
I am here. I am doing this. I'm with these people, and I'm all into this. I'm all into this. I sort of connect with that. Whereas then if it's like, and now I've got to go there, and then I've got to go there, I feel like I have to hit reset all the time, and that's not very helpful for me. So I will look at my week, and I will often think like, what place am I in? Like I'll be like, okay, I'm London here. I'm here on this day or whatever, and I'll think about that place, and that will set me up for the day. So I like the mix over a week, but I quite like it to look the same in a day, if that makes sense. Whereas I think that doesn't work for you.
No, I think variety is one of my values. And so actually I find if I've been in different spaces during a day, it massively increases my energy. So I think it's actually always why kind of corporate life, I did find it quite hard, the whole back-to-back meetings. You could be in a meeting room for 3 or 4 hours. And I actually get a bit sort of like, oh, I need to go outside. I just need to be somewhere different. And ideally with doing something different as well. So I actually don't mind a bit of switching during a day, switching of contexts, not too much because too much is a bit of a killer. Like it's too hard. But if it was like, well, in the morning I'm doing this one thing, and then, I'm going out for a walk, or I'm going to a different place, or like, I've actually started to do this much more in the last 6 months. I live like just outside London, and sometimes I come into London at the end of a day, which almost feels counterintuitive. As everyone else is going home, I go into London, and that might be because I'm going to an event. So recently I went to see Reid Hoffman speak. And you sort of like, it feels a bit like, I can imagine you going, that feels inefficient.
I was about to say that.
Why
I think
are you not getting into London for the day to then go to that? But I go, oh no, because then I've had a better start to my day because I'm at home. I'd rather be at home first thing in the morning, always. I've gone for a morning walk. I've delivered, I've given energy to whatever I'm doing for Amazing If, had whatever conversations. Then that part of my day closes. Then I've gone on a train and there's a bit of transition, and that's a kind of, I think trains I find are quite a neutral energy moment. I'm like listening to a podcast or I'm reading something, and then I can give energy and attention to then the event that I'm going to in the evening, and then I sort of go home on a high. And so I think sometimes that's about experimenting as well with like what gives you energy around like place and environment. Because even when I worked in big companies, I was definitely, when hot desking first became a thing.
Yeah.
And even now, actually, I talked to someone in a company that I will keep anonymous last week, who was like, "Oh, we've got a new space and people are going to be hot desking. Everyone's really antsy about it. People get really uptight about hot desking."
Yeah.
Whereas I was always like, "Great, I'd love to not work in the same place every day." And I was an early adopter of like, "Oh, go and work in the canteen, go and work in the open spaces, go and work in the coffee shop." I'm like, "Yeah, brilliant. I want to do that." But I think for some people, they find that sort of an added stressor to their day, which I do understand as well. It's just very different to me.
Thing. I think this is about like energy and efficiency. Like it is efficient for me to design a day that looks like sort of same play, same, like to get that done, like to get the done thing. Whereas that isn't efficient for you, that your energy is not efficient, like it drains without the difference. And it's, again, I think I almost had like a Venn diagram of what's the best environment for you, what does good energy look like for you, and what does efficiency, like it's sort of like those in the middle of that is how you design an environment that works well.
And I do think you described like your flow of energy during a week. The one thing we haven't talked about a lot, but we both know makes a massive difference, is also kind of how you do spend your time and what your energy looks like after work. Because we were both reflecting on over the last month, some of that hasn't worked for us. So in the spirit of balance, like things have disappeared or we've not managed to make things happen in our personal lives that we know both then give us energy. And then obviously that energy flows into the next day at work. And so I always do look at my diary and my calendar, and it's why we spend so much time. We sort of care a lot about what does the diary look like and is it going to work? Because actually when some of those things go off balance, even if they're sort of personal things, you then see it show up elsewhere. And so even like last week, even not knowing we were doing this podcast, I actually went through my diary between now and my summer holiday, and I do schedule like going for a walk in the middle of a day, because I noticed that I dropped off, and if I don't put those in, no one else is going to. And then actually by putting it in, the time doesn't normally get taken. But yeah, like it's this, that sounds like a small thing, but that makes a really big difference to my energy during a day. Like I would never do a workshop for a company that we work with without having had a break beforehand, because that break is that's sort of when I like reboot, and then I'm like ready to go.
So I think to make this useful for you, I mean, hopefully it's been interesting hearing what Sarah and I do, but I think to make it useful for you, I would say look at your diary with energy in mind. Like where are your highs, your lows, maybe do that drawing of kind of what your ideal kind of week would look like. And I think talk about it with your team. Maybe that's just your manager, like you're kind of, this is my energy flow in a week, or ideally with your team so you can hear what works well for them too. And I think that just a general kind of more self-awareness and shared awareness of energy, the exchange, for example, the highs and the lows, is where you can start to then identify some actions, what you might do differently as a result of it.
The conclusion that you and I have both got to is you can do this individually, but you can also be better together because of it. So when we are together, because we do know this about each other, it's like I take a break by myself.
That's so true.
Helen takes no breaks. Today, for example, I haven't taken a break where I might normally take a break, but because I knew there was a break coming, I was like, oh, okay, that's okay. And I've sort of compromised a bit for Helen, because I go, well, that will make Helen happy, and I'm okay too. And so I think just knowing that just means that you can compromise enough also within your context, within the teams that you're in. A bit like, if you're doing like a team away day, I do actually think talking about, my high energy moments over the last month have been, what are your top 3 high energy moments at work over the last month? And what's been one moment that's drained your energy? And that's not about being critical about the job or the organisation, because everybody would have one moment in the last month that's drained your energy. I actually don't know what that would be for all of our team, but that is actually a conversation I would really like to have. Because like we had the conversation 2 or 3 weeks ago where we were like, Mondays are draining our energy. And it was a specific day for loads of reasons. But then because we had the conversation, we've done something about it, or we're at least trying to do something about it. And so I think it's just making it really visible. And I think really connecting the dots between energy equals impact. You know, like what? I mean, partly you're doing this because you feel better, like you just feel better in your week. But the big payoff, I guess, is then the quality of what you are doing. It will make a really big difference. So it's sort of worth it for everyone.
So we would love your reflections on this. Any thoughts on how Sarah and I manage our energy, any conversations that you have as a team and insights you get from it, please let us know, because we're really interested in hearing your thoughts. So it's just Helen and Sarah at squigglycareers.com.
So we hope you found that useful. That's everything for this week, and we'll see you again soon. Bye for now.